I often hear people say, oh, well, I get the concepts and I understand the possibility, this, that, and the other, right? But I'm not there. I'm not there yet. I'm still working on it, right? That's the first mistake. To think that you're not there, right? If you weren't there, you wouldn't be hearing my voice if you weren't there, right? So the first thing you have to understand is that you are there. You are there. And the reason you're saying that you're not there is because you continue to depend on what you think. And you think you're not there, and then you conclude that's true, I'm not there. But the awareness of you thinking that you're not there is there. The awareness of you thinking that you're not there is there. And so you don't have to try and be that. You can't not be that. You have always been that. You will always be that. Okay? So it's important, and this is why it's important to have the teaching and the teacher. So the teacher can tell you, I don't care what you think, you know? You are the awareness, and you are the awareness right now. You are there. I don't care what you think. You might care what you think, but caring what you think has made you crazy. And if you use that to determine the truth about this, you'll stay crazy, because the thoughts will continue to say you're not there. Because thinking can't produce aliveness. Thinking can't produce the awake state. Thinking can't produce the reality of what exists, which is the awareness. Thinking can't produce that. Right? So it's important to understand that when you practice meditation, if you have the determination, if you have the persistence, if you understand the teaching, if you have guidance, and you do it over time, right, eventually you will start to come out of the fog. Eventually you will start to have a consistent awareness that allows you to pay attention to the process that continues to occur in your mind, so that you can see when it's off the rails. It's not always off the rails. You know, not every thought you have is crazy. A lot of the thinking that we do is called the working mind. You know, it's practical thinking. You can cause it. You can make it happen. But most of the time, the larger percentage of the time, when we're not actively intending to use the thought process, it continues to run. This is called the default state. It continues to run, and when it continues to run, it is your conditioning running. It is your conditioning talking to you. The voice in your head is your past talking to you. Where does it get that information? From your past experiences, which right away gives you an idea of how unworkable that is, because what's happening now is not what happened then, right? So if your behavior comes from what happened then, and it's not a good facsimile for what's happening now, which it isn't a lot of the time, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. What's happening now, what's happening then is not what's happening now, and what's happening now is available for you to see if you learn to pay attention to it and recognize it other than the thought process. If you learn to pay attention to it, one of the things that you come to see and recognize through the process of experiencing meditation is that you can trust awareness. Most human beings don't trust awareness, which is a big problem, since that is your fundamental state of being. If you don't trust your fundamental state of being, you're going to have a problem, right? Most people don't trust awareness because most people think that without thinking, you won't know anything. Now watch, this is a very important thing to understand. Most people think that without thinking, you won't know anything. If I don't think, how will I know what's going on? Well, you know what's going on all the time, and most of that knowledge of what's going on is not occurring because of what you're thinking, it's because of what you're aware of, isn't it? Awareness knows. Awareness knows. Even when you think that you're thinking and that's what's producing knowledge, the awareness is really behind the whole thing all the time, doing the knowing. Thinking doesn't know. Thinking can't know anything. Thinking is just an activity, right? The awareness is that which knows. And if you learn to trust awareness, right, you don't have to depend on thinking. You can practice being out of your mind, you can practice being out of the thought process and be present to what's happening and know what's going on. In fact, not only know what's going on, but have a clearer perception, a clearer seeing of what's going on than you would have if it was getting processed through thinking. That's not hard to understand, you know? You know, how many times do you look back at what you've done and say, what was I thinking when I did that, right? So one of the things that's important to understand about this is that what a lot of people think is that when I start to practice meditation, I start to realize the possibility, but I'm not there yet, okay? Don't make that mistake. You are there, you're always there, okay? And you will always be thinking that you're not. You've got to stop believing that narrative, that's all. You've got to stop believing that narrative, right? And you have to understand that in the beginning of the waking up process, as Kevin said, you have one foot in the shit and one foot out, right? But and that process is going to be an intermediary reality for a while. That's purgatory. You know, you're going to be in an intermediary reality for a while. It doesn't happen that, I practiced meditation and then I woke up. And when I woke up, now I see everything clearly as it is all the time. I'm happy, satisfied, and at peace all the time. There's never any problems. That's naive. That's naive. The difference is, especially in the beginning of the process, right? The difference is when you're crazy, you know you're crazy. That's a good thing. That's a good thing, you know? When you're crazy, you know you're crazy, because before that you were crazy and you didn't know you were crazy. You thought you were sane. You thought crazy was sane. And it was easy to think crazy was sane because most of humanity is crazy and they call that sane. Right? So you figure I'm just a normal everyday person. I'm, you know, if I'm crazy, we're all crazy because I'm just like everybody else, right? So that's not the way you want to relate to this. You have to understand that just because everybody else is crazy, that doesn't mean it's sane. It doesn't make it normal, right? So you have to understand that when you start to come out of this, you live in an insane world. You live in an insane society, right? So here you are now trying to be aware of the reality of what's happening by paying attention, be aware of the reality of what's happening by watching the thought activity, right, with vigilance, you know, to see when it goes off the rails so you don't go with it, right? Here you are doing that, but you live in an insane world. So the people around you still want you to be insane so that they can relate to you. It can create problems, right? Because now you're not participating in the insanity anymore. You know, you can't get into a good fight with anybody anymore because you don't believe in fighting anymore. You don't think it makes any sense, right? So, so you have to understand that the process is one in which when you start to get aware of awareness as reality, when you start to get aware of awareness as seeing things as they are, and practicing that informally, not just in formal meditation, practicing that informally. One of the ways you know that meditation is working is you start to be more awake in your ordinary, everyday experience, right? You've been practicing meditation for a while and all of a sudden something happens, somebody says something to you that you remember, that thing that they said to you, you remember that made you very mad in the past, but you don't feel mad now. You don't feel mad. You might even have angry thoughts come up. You may even feel an arousal of energy in your body called anger, right? But you don't buy it. You don't follow it. You see it happening, but you're not relating to it anymore because you now have recognized that's crazy. I'm not willing to continue to be crazy, so I'm not gonna go along with that. I'm not gonna consistent with it. I'm not gonna speak from there, right? And when you start to practice that, you're applying what meditation has provided you. When you start to practice that, you're now available to watch your own mind operate, and when it's behaving in an insane way, you see that, and you don't go along with it because you know where that took you in the past. You know that caused you a lot of suffering. You know that if you're somebody like me, I mean, I didn't wake up when I was a young man. I woke up in the middle of my life, right? I already did a lot of damage, right? But even if you wake up in the last week of your life and you did a lot of damage up until that time, right? Don't worry about it, right? Don't worry about it, because there is no time. See, one of the things you wake up to is that time is an illusion, right? The only reality of time is the ever-present eternal moment. That's the only reality of time. So if you wake up and you wake up a week before the body dies, right? You have woken up into your life, which is the ever-present moment, and that's all there is. So you didn't lose anything. You see, you didn't lose anything. The truth is timeless. The truth only exists in the present moment, and so if you wake up into the present moment, it doesn't matter how much time has passed. According to the convention of time, it doesn't matter. You are experiencing a timeless reality in which the experience you're having is an experience of liberation, an experience of freedom. It's an experience that you know that no matter how crazy the voice in my head gets, I'm not the voice, thank God. I found that out, right? Because that voice was not only telling me to do stupid stuff, but it was driving me crazy and keeping me up at night and stressing out my body and causing me to need medication, right? So that's the thing, you see. Don't worry about, don't let go of the idea that what this is about is what they call enlightenment. And people have this idea, oh, I want to experience enlightenment. What's that mean? It means that I will become a saint. I mean, something will click, and all I would want to do after that is smile and have flowers. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, If you look at some of the teachers that are the leaders of non-dual teaching, if you were to follow Rupert Spira around in his life would be an ordinary existence. It wouldn't be the life of a saint, He would get annoyed. He would still get annoyed, He's had conflict with his children, right? So it's not about that. It's not about all of a sudden becoming some perfect reality. No, it's about appreciating the fact that now I am awake enough to see when my tendency to go to sleep comes up. I'm awake enough to see when my tendency to forget the truth and believe what the voice in my head is telling me, and I now know that that will lead me to hell. I now know that that will cause suffering. I now know that'll take me out of my life. It'll take me out of my life, and when it takes me out of my life, it takes me into a thought world in which I think that everything should be a certain way, and the way that I think it should be is literally crazy. The way I think it should be is literally crazy. I should be happy all the time. That's crazy. I should be comfortable all the time. That's insane. But that's what the thought activity is producing, this belief, that life should be easy, I should be comfortable, I should be at peace, I should be happy all the time. That's what the thought reality is producing. When you wake up, you realize, wait a minute, I was thinking that things should be a certain way, and now I'm seeing the way things are, and what I'm seeing in terms of the way things are is that everything is working. When I was thinking about it, it wasn't working. When I see it the way it is, it's working. I realize up needs down. I realize I can't be happy if I didn't know something other than happiness so that I would know when I was happy. Right? Everything's working. But I didn't know when it was working when I thought it had to be a certain way. And because I thought it had to be a certain way, I was suffering a lot because I was trying to control myself. I was trying to control my body. I was trying to control my mind. I was trying to control my behavior. Look at the failure that is. Look at the failure that it is. The one thing you can be sure of is if you're trying to control your behavior, your behavior will not be controlled. Anything you resist will persist. Anything you reject will continue to be a problem, right? Because existence, what exists and the way things are happening is working. It's working. Human beings decide to play God. Human beings decide, I don't care if the universe is happening a certain way. I have better ideas about it. I have better ideas about how you should be and how I should be and how nature should be, and the whole 9 yards. I have my own version of the way things should be, And I know this is true, and I know that it's right because my father believed the same thing, and his father believed the same thing, and it's been handed down for generation and generation, right? So we're proud of our heritage. We're proud of the fact that we're still carrying on these important traditions that cause us misery. That's insane. That's insane. So if you wake up, you get very ordinary and very common, and you realize that life is already working. So now you're learning to pay attention in such a way where whenever you think life is not working, that you recognize that's just a thought, it's coming from your conditioning, and your conditioning is a mistake. That's a mistaken belief that life's not working. It's a mistaken belief that things should be different than they are. Not only should they not be different than they are, but the way they are is perfect. I mean, if you just listen to what I just said, and you're like all the rest of humanity in terms of the state of mind you're in, that doesn't go in very easily, does it? Everything that's happening is the way it's supposed to happen, and everything is perfect, right? Your mind says, no, that can't be right. That can't be right. All I have to do is think about politics. That can't be right. All I have to do is think about my kids and how they misbehave. All I have to do is think about myself and my bad habits. Right? That can't be right. Well, the only reason all that happens that way is because you're resisting the truth. You're resisting the fact that everything's already working. You're trying to get what's working to work. You're trying to get what's working to work. Same thing with meditation, right? That's what people do with meditation. I want to learn how to meditate. Okay. So you see, the reality of meditation, the reason it's such a difficult thing to establish a practice is because meditation is something that you're already doing. What is meditation? Meditation is waking up and realizing that you're the awareness that is real, alive, and awake. That's what meditation is, right? Waking up and realizing you're the awareness that is real, alive, and awake, right? Did that just start? No, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. So you're not changing anything. You're stopping, what you're doing when you wake up is you're stopping the overlay. You're stopping, covering over the reality of what's happening with all these crazy beliefs and thoughts that have nothing to do with the truth. That's what you're doing. You're already there. It's very, very important to understand no matter what thoughts you have, you are already there. You are meditating all the time. It is your natural state. It is the natural state to meditate. We talk about it in terms of meditation because it's in contrast to the unnatural state. It's in contrast to the unnatural state. But meditation itself, when you establish an experience of meditation, you're establishing something that's a natural state. And you're not establishing anything. It is already the case. You're ending your establishment with what's not true. And it's very important to understand that the mind and the thought process has dumbed down and minimized what meditation is. The thinking activity has dumbed down and minimized what meditation is. Because if you understand the teachings, right, and you understand the truth, you realize meditation is an essential aspect of your evolution. It's an essential aspect of your evolution, You're born as an infant, you have no conditioning, you're not a thinker yet, right? Then you take on what your society gives to you, you start thinking, you get an identity, you take that identity to be true and real, and you take your beliefs and your understandings about reality to be reality. That's the basic condition of humanity, right? But there's another phase that has to happen after that, when you return to the innocence of the baby, but you can't actually go back and be the baby, and you're better off not going back and being the baby because now you know how to function in society, you know how to play the game, right? But you wake up to your true nature, so you're not limited anymore, and you're not suffering because you believe that you're something that you're not. That's a natural evolution that happens. But you need to have something like meditation to carry you out of the condition and into the natural state. But you see, as I said, meditation has been misunderstood and dumbed down, turned into religion, turned into stress reduction, right? Because it's misunderstood, because very few people really understand what it is. It's natural. Meditation is natural. The way people live and behave is unnatural. It's unnatural. You don't have to take my word for it. Go home and put the news on. You don't have to take my word for it. How can what's on the news be natural? You know, we're human beings. Well, I mentioned this to my wife the other night when they were talking about some of the things that human beings do to one another. There is no other creature on the face of the earth that is as cruel as a human being. No other creature on the face of the earth that's as cruel as a human being. And the only way that can be the case is a human being has got to be so lost in an identity that's living in fear all the time and threatened all the time, so lost in that identity that it can justify what it does. It can justify murder, can justify war, can justify hatred, right? Those things become understandable. They're rationalized, aren't they? They're rationalized. And so then we can practice that between ourselves too. We can be at war with one another, children and their parents, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, right? Can be at war because it's an acceptable way of behaving, right? It's an acceptable way of behaving. It's part of the reality that we consider to be actually real when it's not. It's a made-up, crazy state of mind that everybody is confused about and believes is actually real and true. So when you start meditating, you start to gradually come out of that bad nightmare, that bad dream, and you start to realize everything's actually already working, right? So if I pay attention, I can start to come out of my unworkable ways and start to be ways that are consistent with the way things work. So what happens is the personality, right, evolves. The personality starts to get reoriented and reestablished and reprogrammed to be consistent with the way things really are, right? So the personality has to be there. You have to have a way, you have to have a way to communicate and relate, right? But that personality can be an enlightened personality. That personality can be an awake personality. And if it's an awake personality, there will be fulfillment. Fulfillment, what's that mean? Fulfillment means there was the capacity for something to be filled and it was filled, right? That's fulfillment. There was the capacity for something to be filled and it was filled. So your life is a capacity for experiencing being alive, happy, peaceful, and satisfied. And when you fulfill on the evolution, the final phase of the evolution, right? That which has the capacity to be filled is filled. That's fulfillment. You realize that your life is an opportunity for you to experience a human life as it is, as a human life is, not as some human life that you wish it was or you believe it should be, but as it actually is. And human life as it is, if you're grounded and if you're awake and aware of things as they are, it's fulfilling. It's a fulfilling experience. So that when it comes to an end, right, you can let go and allow the conclusion to be a conclusion and not be freaked out about it. The only reason people are freaked out about death is because they haven't been alive. That's why they're afraid of death. And if you're afraid of death, you're afraid of life. If you're afraid of death, and most people are afraid of death, therefore they're afraid of life. Why? Because if you're afraid of death, you're spending most of your life trying to survive instead of live. You see? So that's why one of the things in these teachings is to stop denying death. Don't deny death. It's like denying the light. It's like denying the night. If you deny the night, how can you experience the day? You know? If you deny death, how can you experience life? If you accept the fact that this is, as my Zen teacher says, right? If you accept the fact that this is a temporary affair, this is a visit. This is a visit, you know? This is a visit, and you're not a self. This is a temporary situation, and you're not a self. It's life happening, and the life is happening through the senses that allow you to experience this thing called life that is something that we can be grateful for. It didn't have to happen. It's one of the things Douglas Harding used to say. This didn't have to happen. You didn't have to be born, but you were. And my Zen teacher says, when you're born and you take your first breath, you have fulfilled your whole life. That's the fulfillment of your whole life, right? Because you have before you an opportunity to experience being alive and experience the human life, experience the world. That's the whole life has happened as soon as you take your first breath, right? But then we turn it into shit. and die in fear and die in terror, right? Most people's deaths are a tragedy, right? And death is always a shocking experience to most of us, right? Because we deny it. We keep it out of our awareness. We deny it. So it's always a shocking experience instead of a natural thing. It's as natural as anything could possibly be. Death is just as natural as birth. You know, we think birth is a special thing and death is something we want to deny. No, they're just natural, you know. They're just natural things that happen all by themselves, and you get to experience the life of a human being in the world. There should be nothing but gratitude about that, right? But instead of gratitude, what there is a lot of complaining, right? A lot of complaining, a lot of struggle, a lot of coping, a lot of complaining, a lot of attempting to be in control, a lot of avoiding, trying to get away, you know, trying to maintain comfort. One of my teachers used to say, if you want to be comfortable, life is not comfortable. So if your commitment is to be comfortable, have all your major organs submersed in lukewarm water, and then you'll be comfortable. But if you want to live a life, a real life of a human being, right, then you should be happy to experience the ups and the downs, all of the complication of it, all the confusion of it, right? That's all of the stuff that makes it an enjoyable variety of experience, right? And the idea that you can control it is an illusion. That's one of the things, you know, when you get to the real high teachings, you come to the realization that there's nothing here to control. There's nothing here to control. You have no control, you never have, and you never will. And everything that's happening is happening according to cosmic law. You have no free will. Everything that's happening is happening according to cosmic law. You've never had control over it. You never will have control over it. The only thing that's possible for you is to relax and enjoy yourself. That's the only possibility. Either that or suffer. So it's a pretty easy choice, isn't it? But you can't get to the enjoyment of it unless you go through the evolutionary process of using meditation to come out of the limited understanding and the limited experience that people have. All right. Any questions then before we end this session tonight? So keep coming back. You know, this is one of the things, you know, when I work with my clients in my psychotherapy practice, one of the things I tell them is when we meet, I nudge you back onto the correct path. Between times, you go nuts again. But if you keep coming and I keep nudging you, after a while, you'll catch on and be able to be your own therapist, and then you don't need me.